Pontefract, West Yorkshire, 1969. A mother makes one decision that will haunt her until the day she dies. This is the true crime story that proves your worst nightmare can happen with a single word, yes. 4-year-old Susan Preece had bright eyes and an infectious laugh that could light up the cramped old vicarage where she lived with her single mother and 6 siblings. They weren't travelers themselves, just a struggling family caught between crushing poverty and a foster care system that kept tearing her children away, one by one. When a well-dressed Scottish couple befriended them, it felt like divine intervention. The woman had multiple sclerosis and desperately wanted a daughter. They had 2 sons, money to travel, and most importantly, they seemed to genuinely adore little Susan, showering her with attention she rarely received. So when they offered to take Susan on the adventure of a lifetime, 2 weeks at Disney World in Florida, her mother saw a miracle she could never afford to give her daughter. All they needed was Susan's birth certificate and a letter of permission. Simple paperwork for what seemed like an act of pure kindness. On that fateful day in 1969, Susan's mother knelt down, kissed her 4-year-old daughter goodbye, and watched her skip away excitedly, chattering about meeting Mickey Mouse. But Susan would never see Disney World, she would never see her mother again, and what happened next would destroy 2 families forever. What happened next exposes a terrifying truth that should make every parent watching this physically sick. Because what these predators did was completely legal, and most of these loopholes still exist today. The Scottish couple didn't need elaborate schemes or forged documents. In 1969, stealing a child required nothing more than a birth certificate and a parent's signature. No background checks. No verification calls. No safety nets. Just 2 pieces of paper between an innocent child and complete erasure from existence. Susan's mother, trusting, desperate, and manipulated by people who had studied her family's vulnerabilities for months, handed over her daughter's birth certificate. Within hours, these criminals had added Susan's name to their family passport as if she were their biological child. But here's the part that should make you furious: this wasn't impulse. This was calculated predation. They had been watching this broken family, identifying the perfect victim, waiting for the exact moment when desperation would override caution. They never boarded a plane to Florida. That was always a lie. Instead, they flew directly to Canada with Susan, then Australia, then New Zealand. 3 countries. 3 fresh starts. And a 4-year-old girl who had just been legally kidnapped by her own government. The system designed to protect children had just gift-wrapped Susan and handed her to strangers with official stamps and smiling approval. No questions asked. No follow-up required. The perfect crime, executed in broad daylight with bureaucratic blessing. And here's what should terrify you: while some laws have changed, the fundamental vulnerabilities that enabled this trafficking still exist. Right now, as you're watching this, there are families just as exposed as Susan's was in 1969. Susan had no idea she'd been stolen, and wouldn't discover this devastating truth for 12 more years. But when she finally learned what had been done to her, her reaction will shatter everything you think you know about survival and forgiveness. If this makes you as angry as it makes me, we need to talk about this in the comments. How do we protect vulnerable families like Susan's? Your voice matters, because silence is what predators count on. For the next 10 years, Susan lived what appeared to be a fairy tale, spoiled, cherished, and genuinely loved by the very people who had destroyed her family. But this beautiful lie was built on the cruelest foundation imaginable. The couple told Susan that her real family had thrown her away, that her mother and siblings didn't want her anymore. Imagine being 4 years old and learning that the people who were supposed to love you most had discarded you like trash. So when this new family rescued her, Susan felt grateful. She felt chosen. She traveled the world with them, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, living in the heart of the traveling community where she was protected, celebrated, and adored. Susan had no reason to question her origin story because her life was genuinely magical. Why would anyone lie about something so heartbreaking? But here's where this story becomes unbearable. When Susan was just 10 years old, the woman she called Mum, the woman with MS who had stolen her, died. Susan was devastated. This woman had been her entire universe, the only mother she could remember. And even drowning in grief, Susan never questioned the lies she'd been fed. For 6 more years, Susan built her identity on deception. She excelled in school, formed friendships, planned her future, all while her real family back in Yorkshire spent every waking moment searching for any trace of their missing baby girl. Then came 1985. Susan was 16 and needed a passport to travel from New Zealand back to Australia. The application required a parent's signature. That's when her entire world imploded. Her father looked at this teenager he'd raised and loved, and spoke 5 words that would obliterate her reality: "I didn't adopt you. I stole you." Picture that moment. 16 years old, and suddenly discovering that your entire existence was built on lies. That the family you thought had abandoned you had actually been desperately searching. That the people who genuinely loved you, who had given you a beautiful childhood, were criminals who had trafficked you across continents. The truth would shatter everything Susan thought she knew about herself, her identity, and her place in the world. But her reaction? Her incredible capacity for forgiveness and love? That's what makes this story a testament to the unbreakable human spirit. If you're not subscribed yet, you're missing stories that matter. This family, both families, deserve to have their story heard. Hit subscribe, it's free and it helps me bring you more cases where justice and healing are possible. Because Susan's journey is far from over, and what happens next will prove that some bonds transcend even the cruelest deceptions. While Susan was building a new life thousands of miles away, back in Pontefract, her mother was living in a hell that no parent should ever endure. And what she did next will break your heart and restore your faith in a mother's love. Susan's mother never stopped searching. Not for one single day in 53 years. She would return to that traveler's site over and over again, walking the same paths where she'd last seen her baby, asking the same desperate questions, clinging to hope when logic said there was none left. Picture this woman, already struggling to feed and house her remaining 6 children, spending her last pennies on bus fare to search abandoned lots and caravan sites. Staying awake nights, staring at the phone, praying for news that never came. She filed missing person reports decade after decade. Multiple appeals. But here's the crushing reality: because she had given written permission for Susan to travel, authorities treated this as a civil matter, not kidnapping. In 1969, there was no digital trail, no international cooperation, no way to track a child once they vanished across borders. Susan's siblings grew up in the shadow of their missing sister. An empty chair at every birthday. A missing voice at every Christmas. They learned to live with questions that carved holes in their hearts. Was Susan alive? Was she safe? Did she remember them? Did she know they were looking? But their mother? She never learned to live with it. She carried that guilt, that desperate love, that crushing responsibility for over 4 decades. Every knock at the door could be news about Susan. Every ringing phone could be the miracle she'd prayed for since 1969. And here's what will destroy you: Susan's mother died in 2014, her heart finally giving out after 45 years of breaking a little more each day. She went to her grave never knowing that her little girl had grown up safe and loved. Never knowing that Susan had become a wife, a mother, a grandmother. Never knowing that just 8 years later, the miracle she died waiting for would finally happen. This mother's love was so powerful that it would reach across death itself and bring her daughter home. Because some bonds are too strong for even decades of separation to break. If you've ever lost someone, you know this pain. Hit that like button for every parent who never stopped searching, who died without answers, who deserved to know their child was safe. They deserve to be remembered. Because this mother's love was about to perform a miracle that would prove hope is never wasted. By 2022, Susan Gervaise was 57 years old, living in Australia with her devoted husband Hamilton and their 3 children. She had built a beautiful life from the ashes of her stolen childhood, but there was always a Susan-shaped hole in her heart, a question that had haunted her for decades. Then one day, someone asked her something that changed everything. What do you think your real family is feeling right now? For the first time in over 50 years, Susan stopped thinking about her own pain and started imagining theirs. A mother who had kissed her 4-year-old goodbye and never saw her again. Siblings who had grown up wondering if their baby sister was dead or alive. Hamilton couldn't bear to watch his wife carry this weight anymore. In June 2022, he made a decision that would rewrite history. He posted a simple message on the Nottingley and Ferrybridge community Facebook page. Does anyone remember a little girl named Susan Preece who went missing in 1969? What happened next defies every law of probability. In a world of 8 billion people, across 5 decades of silence, the impossible was about to unfold. 30 minutes. In just 30 minutes, a local woman saw the post and immediately recognized the story. She knew exactly who Susan's family was and where to find them. When Susan's phone rang and she heard her brother's voice for the first time in 53 years, both of them collapsed in tears. "I'm alive," Susan kept sobbing. "Tell them I'm alive. Tell them I'm safe." All 6 of her siblings were still alive. 5 of them still lived around Pontefract, just miles from where she'd been taken. They had never moved far, never stopped hoping, never stopped believing that someday their sister would come home. Susan decided to time her return to England with her 57th birthday in September 2022. After 53 years of stolen birthdays, she was finally going to celebrate with her real family. After 53 years, Susan was about to come home. But what happened at that reunion will restore your faith in miracles and prove that love truly can conquer anything, even time itself. If you believe in miracles, smash that subscribe button right now. This family's story proves that hope is never wasted, that love never dies, and that sometimes the impossible happens when we refuse to give up. Don't let their miracle go unshared, because somewhere out there, another family is praying for their own impossible moment. September 2022. After 53 years, 4 months, and countless nights of wondering, Susan Gervaise stepped off a plane in England and walked toward the family she'd been stolen from as a 4-year-old child. The reunion happened at Susan's 57th birthday party, but this wasn't just a celebration. This was a resurrection. 4 of her 6 siblings were there, faces she hadn't seen since childhood, now lined with decades of life she'd missed, tears she'd never seen them cry, laughter she'd never heard. But here's what will shatter you: the first thing Susan did was visit her mother's grave. She knelt at the headstone of the woman who had died 8 years too soon, placed her hand on the cold stone, and finally got to say the words her mother had waited a lifetime to hear: "I'm okay, Mom. I made it home. You can rest now." Susan's niece Emma captured the magnitude of this miracle. "We never thought this would happen. It's been amazing, especially for my mom. She has Parkinson's and dementia, so it's incredible she's been reunited with her sister before she deteriorates. She's complete now. Complete. After 53 years of being broken, this family was finally whole. But Susan's story isn't just about one family's miracle, it's become a beacon of hope for every family still searching. It gives a message to anybody who has lost somebody that miracles do happen, she says. There is always hope. Think about that. A woman who lost her entire childhood, her mother, and half a century with her family, and her message isn't about anger or bitterness. It's about hope. It's about never giving up. It's about the power of love to transcend even the cruelest circumstances. Susan's story proves that miracles happen when communities refuse to stay silent. But right now, as you're watching this, there are thousands of families living the same nightmare Susan's mother endured. Thousands of parents going to bed every night not knowing if their child is alive or dead. Susan's mother died without knowing her daughter was safe. Right now, there are parents living that same agony, and we have the power to change that. If this story moved you, and I know it did, you have a moral obligation to share it. Someone watching this might hold the key to another family's miracle. Subscribe, share, and never stop believing in the power of hope and community. Because somewhere out there, another Susan is waiting to come home. Another family is praying for their impossible moment. And maybe, just maybe, you're the person who can help make that miracle happen. Join our community of people who believe every missing person matters, every family deserves answers, and every story deserves to be heard. Comment below with, "Hope never dies" if you're with us. Because together, we can make sure no family waits 53 years for justice, for answers, for their miracle. This is Susan's story. But it's also our story, because we're the ones who can make sure it never happens again.